Life begins anew at 158,900 miles.
How do you like that inspection sticker?
This has been the only peaceful place I can go lately, so let's shift from rabbit to turtle and watch the first impression underneath my 32-year-old Galant VR-4. This is something I've been trying to do for the past 8 years, just trying to put this car in a lift where I can be the one working underneath it.
Before I get very deep into this at all, I thought I'd play around with some of the hunks of rust that fell out of the Galant. It's a 32-year-old car, and this is a weird way to start a video off because this is going to make you absolutely fear the worst. That's what a good director does. All that rust that fell off of this thing only came from the rear differential housing. It's really kind of interesting. Look at all that. I am extremely shocked to poke around under here and look at all the stuff where I see decay just to find shiny, non-rusted, bare metal in all of its glory. Really kind of shocked. I'm gonna grab a light. It's in surprisingly good shape. There's a whole lot of things here that are normally completely rusted out. Road salt, the weather, the climate, the humidity, where it's parked, all of this matters. I'm not proud of myself for leaving this thing outdoors for, I guess I bought it 10 years ago. Not really proud that I left it sitting this long. I wanted to actually do something with this much earlier, but you guys have all been here, you know what happened. It's all documented. This thing is in awesome condition. And these are things you would expect to find. And straighten some of the stuff back out. Make that reflect its former glory. It's in much better shape than a lot of cars you find. Did get its share of time on jack stands. It was owner maintained and through most of its life, if not all of it. And somebody looks like they took pride in it. That's as bad as it gets, surface rust. And that's shocking. The fasteners, sure, those are rusted. Whatevs. All of that'll come clean with a bead blaster. What I'm happy about is I'm not seeing massive amounts of grease or rust. Things like this. All this will clean up. I have plans for all of it. It's easy. That's pretty rotted. See if I can even get that part. Same deal here. It's cracked all the way through. So, shouldn't be that easy to move it. Whole bunch of grease from former wheel bearings and grease fittings on the tie rods, and that'll clean up easy. Now, if the little mineral spirits won't fix here and there, of course not on the rubber stuff, but I guess it all has to go. I did find one spot of rust on the entire chassis. And I'm going to show you over here first. You see what that looks like? Alright. The one and only spot. It's right there. Most of that is surface rust. It looks to me like there's a drain or something above it that allowed that to get saturated. It's got a little hole. And the metal inside of here is smooth. I don't feel any cancer on the inside of the parts it's connected to. It's just this outer piece. So something happened here. I don't know what. but that's totally patchable. That's an easy fix. It does look so big that it's going to compromise the structural integrity of the car. So the sooner I get that out of there and, you know, attach it with some cleaned up metal and seal it in, the better. The more I'll have to work with down the road. Everything else I'm really impressed with. I knew this car was well taken care of. It's the reason why I was willing to put it on my list, or my bucket list of cars to finish. Because there's not really a lot of times where you find a 32-year-old JDM car that's in anywhere near this rust-free condition in the United States climate. So I'm very fortunate. Most everything I find is on fasteners. Oh, we're going to go through all that. You know we got a plan for it. But she needs paint. She needs a couple of body trim pieces, which I have. She needs a front bumper, which I have. She needs a door, which I have. I'm extremely fortunate.
A vacuum cleaner and a screwdriver is usually the best place to start, although I probably should have started with a leaf blower first. Removing the hood is really a two-man job, but with some creative rag placement, it's possible to do it by yourself, followed by more vacuuming and then blasting the really stuck-on stuff out with compressed air. Radiator yoink. Man, I love having a lift. Now for the pre-soak. I'm using penetrating oil on all of the exhaust hangers because it's the exhaust that needs to go first. I'm actually trying to get the drive shaft out of here because it's obvious that I'll need to rebuild it. Plus, it's bolted on top of other things that I'm definitely going to remove. Pry bar makes short work of the exhaust hangers. I left the important ones that prevent it from falling on me. I made that rolling table thing, remember? I pay my own laziness forward wherever possible. Then you watch me brain fart and forget how many hangers I needed to still take loose and still miss one. Embarrassing! Now, back to that drive shaft. 4 12mm bolts and nuts on every all-wheel drive thing that Mitsubishi made in this era. This car did have a turbine on it, so it's actually what rocket surgery really looks like, sort of. And see, it's not so bad. Now just pull 4 carrier bearing bolts and the drive shaft is free. Don't let your shaft dangle because it'll chafe your rubber boot. Try to keep it straight, you know what I'm saying? That's good advice if you don't want to, you don't want it to cost you a low bro boot, which I'll be doing anyway, I'm just saying. For the yoke end of the shaft, you like my little bungee cord trapeze thing that I rigged? Trust me, the dangle is a bad thing on both ends. Bye-bye heat shield, it's seen better days. I'm going to have to try to save it. I'm not going to find a better one anywhere else. And with that stuff out of the way, now we can get a better look at everything. When you have lots of parts and layers, that's often where moisture gets trapped. Bolt flanges and seams are often places where you find the most rust due to dissimilar materials or from scuffing that might occur during assembly and service that allows bare metal to touch oxygen. I'm blown away by how it's getting better and better as I take the layers apart, and how it's the galvanized parts like the heat shields that sacrifice themselves. I'm using penetrating oil on every single fastener I know I'm going to touch, and there's a whole lot of them, brother. Don't fool yourself. This is just the first of many applications, and the reason why I'm being careful at this stage is because I need to preserve as much as I can at every single stage of this, because the difficulty of getting these parts. A fastener problem can destroy the thing that it bolts down or into if you're not careful while you're taking it apart, so this is just like baby shampoo, no more tears. I also sprayed down the hydraulic fittings, and I'll be taking loose the rubber hoses wherever there's a clamp, and really does take all the struggle right out of the exhaust hangers. Don't worry, we'll be back. But first, I'm going to wash most of the top side of this thing off. Not really worried so much about the hood and the roof yet. We have to make a completely separate and different kind of mess with those later. I just want to clean this thing all the way up because it doesn't just have a dirt and grease layer that's accumulated over a period of 17 years of sitting. There's a biological layer growing on this thing right now. It's growing moss, algae, mold, all the things that feed on tree sap and bug poop. Mud dauber nests, you know those things. They love my cars. This was the final eviction of the spider colonies because I've now acquired the long-sought capabilities to do what every single car owner wishes they could do to their own car. get it airborne on a lift and wash the bottom of it. And I really sort of have to because the biological layer continues underneath it. I've just mixed some industrial degreaser with water in a much higher concentration than I should have, and I started with a brush to remove everything loose. I don't care if it's undercoating. If this car was being driven, the undercoating layer is at the stage right now where it would have actually been a liability. That stuff doesn't last forever, and when it cracks and separates from the part, it actually traps moisture and dirt, making it corrode even faster. So if I scrub or blast undercoating off this thing, it's no big deal to me at all. I'd prefer for all the loose stuff to let go and save me that trouble. What to do with the water though? Floor squeegee. It's work to keep up with it. If you ever find yourself doing this, just do a little bit at a time and it won't get away from you. You won't make a flood. You can tell why I'm wearing a Tyvek suit, and the hood on it turns into a great indicator of why if you can't. Gravity. It made more sense for me to get really dirty once rather than having to wash my hands every few minutes or blow through boxes upon boxes of gloves going forward as I work on this thing. But the best reason for me putting myself through all this suffering is we'll get the best possible look we can at everything that's under here. And let me tell you what, this old used car has one straight, clean, complete, and rot-free undercarriage. Well, the rubber stuff's rotted, so every hose, belt, bushing, you name it, that's going to have to be replaced. But nothing on the front and rear subframes is rusted or rotted out or bent. They're pristine. So far, the only rust been spotted has either been a fastener, a mild steel bracket, or a chip in the paint that got, a little bit of light surface rust on it, and that's nothing. I have a playlist for this Galant, and it's actually a really good technical one where I've made lots of progress rebuilding its engine parts, and those who followed it know that I don't just have to rebuild its whole engine, and of course now the drive shaft, I also have to rebuild the all-wheel steering system on both axles too, and that's a challenge. Some of that equipment's disabled, some of the hydraulic lines have been cut, and all of that needs to be replaced, but all of the old worn-out mechanisms that do the work are still here. Due to the location of all the steering parts on both front and rear axles, it just makes the most sense to me to drop both subframes as assemblies and freshen those up while it's all on the floor. I'm going to have to handle every single part on both of them already anyway, do the bushings, do the cleanup, the paint, whatever else they need. I don't want to tie up my lift for however long that's all going to take, so I have to leave both subframes in place for the time being and we'll be able to roll it around. There's also no reason to leave the gas tank or bumpers on it right now either, so I'll do those on the lift too. Restoration means that you're going to take away all these parts, fix everything, and put it all back together like it was when it was new, and I'll just be lucky if I don't break absolutely everything on it taking it apart. I won't be returning this one back to its 100% factory original state, but at least I won't be driving it around with missing body trim pieces and a mismatched door either. So I'll disassemble as much of all this as I can too while I'm under here. And thank you all so much for watching this journey, because it's your time and attention that got me to the point where I'm even standing under my own car in a lift today. Patreon funds the projects, but you guys keep my lights on and going. This is the luckiest Galant on the planet to have all of your attention right now. It makes an enormous impact on the future of these cars, and that means something to me. I mean it. Thank you. Just like the time when I installed the intercooler in this thing, I'm not reading the instructions to take this one apart. I'm just taking a walk down memory lane and recalling my former suffering from what I did wrong on this thing the first time, just avoiding that. If you're taking the bumper off of a car, you have to, of course, disconnect the lights, brackets, supports that connect it to the chassis, and splash guards, all the bolts that might go through the poly bumper Most modern cars are all plastic and styrofoam and easy enough to peel like a banana. This one is not at all. On pretty much every car from the early 90s, the full conversion of plastic push-lock connectors for every single fastener on the front end of every car had not taken place yet. This particular generation Galant chassis actually has roots into the late 80s, but everywhere on your modern car where you see those plastic clips holding your plastic everything together, this car has a steel M6 bolt, whether the part it's securing is steel or not. There are 12 self-tapping steel M6 bolts securing each of the wheel well splash guards, 10 bolts on the headlights, 5 on the bumper shroud, 5 on each fender, 12 through the poly bumper to the body. It still has a dozen plastic clips thrown into the mix for comedy and all the smart places. And the best I can say after all these years that differs from the plastic assembled cars is that it's all still here and it's all still straight because it's all metal and bolts. Bolts that I'll have to extract and replace, sure, but all the plastic stuff is mostly backed with metal, and it only cracked or split where that metal wasn't. At the factory, the Galant bumpers are both about 95% assembled from a group of parts. There's about 4 dozen bolts and steel-backed brackets that secure just the bumper skin to a steel bumper that's padded with styrofoam to support the shape of the front end. Well, that whole assembly is then attached to the frame rails using 8 14mm bolts. Once secured, the body fasteners, turn signals, trim pieces, all the splash guards, those are put in place. So if you need to replace just a bumper skin on a Galant VR4, you can't just replace the bumper skin. You have to do this entire job because you won't be able to access that myriad of bolts that hold the bumper skin onto the bumper. Add to that, it's always going to be the fasteners that are on the front end and the back of any car that you're going to have the most trouble with, no matter how old that car is. Expect to have to replace all of them if it's as old as mine, though. Weather always gets the best of these. Despite all of that pre-soaking, re-soaking, and immediate prior application to attempted removal of all these fasteners, I'm currently only at about a 50-50 ratio of successful extractions versus snapped 6mm bolts inside of these wheel wells, headlights, and other parts. No matter how careful I'm being, it's pretty bad. This is going to cost me a lot of time and trouble extracting those, but this is normal and it should be expected. I've got an uncut, uncracked, unmolested front bumper for this one, and I'll install that one later. But removing this front bumper assembly completes the engine intake removal that I started years ago, because this intercooler is bolted to the bumper and it went with it. Not your factory unit, but it's the best fitting intercooler upgrade anyone with a Galant could ever want. One where, like a bumper skin, you still have to do this whole job to install or remove. It's pretty awesome, and I'm glad I was a part of its installation 20-something years ago, while I was running a fever of 103 degrees and didn't know it until I got home at 3 a.m. Good times. Nothing makes a person that's restoring a car this old happier than finding only just a tiny little bit of surface rust and only on the horns and where the bumper bolts to the body. I gotta get these headlights out though. I removed the inner bolts already, but the corner lights were being stubborn, and the outer bolts are hiding underneath. These lights work and fit exactly like the ones on my first-gen Hyundai do, only the plastic prongs on these original units are still 100% intact. Not all that common for a car this old. Once you remove the corners, you can access those last couple of bolts that hold each of the headlights in. Sadly, even the well-painted, pristine-looking bolts snap right off just as easy as some of the rustiest ones. I should buy stock and Fastenal, and that wraps up the majority of taking the front end apart for now. Now we can take a look at the dirt and soil that collects inside the body. I should grow tomatoes in here. There's a better look at my hole. One bolt left on that splash guard, but I'll come back for it. Let's mess around with the rear end and gas tank, shall we? Might as well get both of these wheels out of the way. To drop the rear subframe, I need to disconnect the emergency brake cables from the calipers, and that's the easy part. However, these brackets and bolts that secure them to the calipers are a whole different story. One came out fairly easily and it just grabbed onto my swivel socket and wouldn't let go without an excessive amount of wrangling because the bolt threads walked the bolts so deep up into the socket and made it work like a clamp anyway. On the other side, of course, the bolt snapped off and I had to use a punch and reach in there to set the bracket free. And no biggie, the cables are fine and I plan on replacing all this anyway. Each cable's bolted down in a half dozen other places along the subframe and body, and some are in really tricky spots, but I'm not complaining. I'm easily at eye level with all of it, and with both cables free and out of the way, I've just got fuel lines, hydraulic lines, brake lines, ABS wiring, and my time on the floor later is going to be reduced to a minimum. We can get the gas tank out of the way and then set this rear bumper free. I'm 100% certain that many of these bolts are going to snap right off. And both of these, 100%. I ran out of Croil.
It's $26 a can.
I sprayed PB Blaster on the brake line clips. I sprayed it on the clamps for the fuel tank filler hose. I sprayed all of the fuel tank bolts, the fuel lines, all the body bolts. Those are sprayed on the back side. Actually, I need to get the other all the way around the gas tank, like I said. And you see right here where the tow hooks are, it's bolted on 2 different angles, 2 different size, 2 different pairs of bolts. I greased that from the inside and out.
because I want that to come apart easily without a fight. Bolts look pretty good on the inside. I don't know if you can see up in there, but when I saw them, they looked pretty good to me. I don't know, I doubt that's getting in there, but we'll see when I take it apart. But got everything on the power steering lines also sprayed down with rust penetrating oil. This is all in an effort to try to not destroy things. I need as much info on those threads as I can. Let's see if they snap. That's just how this one's going to be, you know? This one's going to take extra special care for bolt extraction, and I'm fine with that. That's not going to be fun, but it's also not body work, it's just thread repair. With all new fasteners, I'll have a clean, straight, shiny, serviceable, and all original car going forward. And that's what's most important to me. Ooh, that's some rust. Yes, there's rust, and it does go beyond the differential housing, but so far what I've seen looks like it's not the body. I think we're going to find something here. It's all stuff I can easily fabricate my own replacements for and fix right here in my shop. Nobody's selling this stuff, but I'm lucky that so far that I'm only finding that one singular hole up front on the entirety of this car's body. Well, broke 6 out of 8 of them anyway, so 75%. I was off by 25. I'm hoping to do something different and less destructive for a minute. Oh, no way. Really? Even with flare wrenches, I thought this was going to be a whole lot more difficult. I've spread a flare wrench open on a DSM fuel fitting before. Ooh, that old gas smell. That was really satisfying this time around. It smells like furniture varnish, but with a touch of diesel locomotive. It's not the worst smell that a car can make, but now I know why 2 sets of injectors clogged shut on this car while it sat. My biggest challenge is not letting it run up my sleeve and getting it all over me because it stank. The other 2 rubber hoses put up a decent amount of resistance for what they are. I was impressed. I mean, I wasn't going to let them win, but they wouldn't fall quickly. They seemed to enjoy the punishment. Now for the rear high pressure power steering lines that I've been soaking with penetrating oil for days.
Oh, that line's done.
This one's rusted straight through behind the fitting. Looks to me like the original source of why the system was disabled. It didn't take much pressure for the line to split halfway open like a boiled eggshell when the fitting popped loose.
Rusted right through.
I've been toying with several ideas regarding what to replace these lines with, but all the info as well as the actual fitting itself that I need are right there. I just dropped it on the floor. Let's be honest, lines are easy enough to bend and flare and weld tabs too.
Same.
I just hope the inside of the rear steering assembly is in good enough shape to rebuild. But so much for being less destructive. I need to drop the gas tank, so it's time to disconnect the fuel filler hose and drain vent hose. I actually replaced the big hose back when I bought the car with the brand new OE model. The fuel ate through it as it sat, so these are easy to take loose. I've been in here before. I cleaned out the trunk, but wanted to clean up all the gutters and seals, clear out the inner biological layer, you know what I'm saying? Get down to what's there, and you know, the only rust I found on it is the heads of the screws around the window trim. They screw into rubber, and you don't really care that I cut myself on one of them, but the trunk is perfect though. Everything's here, plus there's even a fire extinguisher. I'm going to clean it all out and give it the same treatment as the gutters, and it still all looks shiny and good as new. The spare's completely flat, but it's clearly never been used. Not a mark on the inner flange. It's perfect, so I don't even need to polish it up. But the rest of the trunk needs a good scrub. Yeah. Let's hope that all the days of soaking the gas tank bolts with different oils pays dividends, because these aren't the bolts and nuts that I really want to have to mess with. I'm not ready to catch the tank yet, but if I'm lucky, I should be able to back them all off so it's still holding the tank up with 2 or 3 threads each. And that's it. It stays there. And people, I really couldn't be happier with the pre-soak because they didn't put up a fight at all. When I pull the rear subframe, I need to not have the brake lines attached to it, so those have got to come loose. The brake pedal's off limits now at this point. I'm just going to leave this one to gravity to bleed itself for now. Rag in the pan so it doesn't splash out on me. The bumper marker lights need to go. It'll be good to have those out of the way before I go pulling the bumper off it. My list keeps getting shorter and shorter, and honestly, I wasn't expecting to do all this in this video, but here we are. Let's go back to that gas tank again.
I think I'm just gonna take, I don't know, 3 of these out. And
I know it's a bit eccentric, but this worked so good the first time we did it with the exhaust. Bolt head. Why not go ahead and do it again? Yes, there's a transmission jack about 100 feet that way. But again, I'm showing off my laziness. We'll drop the gas tank with this thing. Why not? Weighs a third as much. So my plan is just to pull the 3 nuts left that are holding the tank up, to drop it that last ½ inch onto the table, one side at a time. Then raise the car up and unplug the fuel pump. Alright, I'll own it. I completely failed Gallant Fuel System 101. Wiring harness disconnection isn't on top of the sending unit on this one either, just like it wasn't on the Hyundai. And I'm gonna guess my answer is gonna be found underneath this plate. There you go. Before I start pulling or doing any of that. There we go. I'm gonna just push the grommet through. There we go. I thought this would be a bigger problem area than it really is. You will see that all of this cleans up like the rest of it. I did find there's substantial rust on the inner metal pieces. I'm saying it that way even though it's part of the bumper. But there's more than that that's rusted in there. All of these plates that fasten the outer poly section of the bumper to the body, all these braces are pretty badly rusted on this car. So might be a lot of that stuff I have to fabricate, and I don't mind. It's good that I have that there that I can measure it and get its specs, but this looks pretty good. I just have to pull 8 bolts out, 10 actually, or 12, to get the bumper off. There's 8, 10, 10, 10, 10, 8, 12. Heck, there's 4 more in the trunk. But I've got the body already disconnected all the way around on the fender wells. And I'm going to take this rear bumper off and we'll find out what the rest of the carnage looks like. Ooh. I may only be able to get 2 out with this socket. Yep. I don't like it. These tow hook brackets are getting cleaned up and restored. I didn't really need to remove them to pull the rear bumper off, but I still needed to take a look behind them to make sure it's all solid. Behind the scenes, I already found where all the rust is coming from, and both ends of the bumper have basically turned to pie crust and rusted off. You'll see. Who cares though? It's something invisible from the outside of the car and something I can accurately reconstruct or replace. Nobody but 100,000 something people on YouTube's ever going to see it, that's all. I'll make you proud. It doesn't matter to me. The paint and the clear coat on the body from the outside looked to be in really rough shape. It was multiple shades of green when I bought it, and the 2-tone black trim was already faded. I just binge watched the Gallant playlist to see all the places where I wrecked my expectations in life and on this project. But anyway, what I was saying is that it needed to be repainted anyway. It needed all of this exact same work when it first showed up here, and it's been well preserved sitting over pavement instead of in the woods. I collected its replacement parts. The body's straight except for one. Oh, now, look, there's 2 dents. 2 dents now that the bumper's gone. One was hiding invisibly behind this bumper, and I can straighten that. Okay, full disclosure people, there's a whole lot more than 2 dents wrong with this body, and anything that's not straight is technically a dent at the very least. There's still a lot to fix. This was a kid wrecking his bike into my car in my driveway. Not my kid, and he got a stern talking to. Most of the damage like around this door handle is of the door ding variety. This looks like someone opening a door with a full hand to me. This fender is what bothers me the most though. It looks like the dent was here prior to the paint. And if that's the case, then why not fix the dent first? But if this is supposed to be the original paint bubbling off, then why is somebody painting over damage on... Anyway, I said it bothers me. More door dingus, Dingus Maximus. And this is the other one of the second dents that I was really referring to earlier. It's the only other dent that's not a door ding. It's not a friendly or fun one to fix, but I have to. Looks like a tree branch fell on it when it was sitting in the woods under the cover because there's no mark in the paint from it. But that's still not all. I did find a teeny tiny little bit of front end damage.
You can see the seam sealer is cracked right here. A little white fissure. This should all be at 90s and it's spread out a little bit. Additionally, if I got a straight edge and I laid it across the top right here, right across this piece where you see that little wrinkle in the top, you would find that it dips. So I found here that the front left frame rail, see right there, got pulled away from the sheet metal. That got stretched pretty hard and it looks like it tugged on that spot weld. Looks fairly straight, but it's not exactly. This piece here looks like it got rolled, pulled over a little bit because she's not flat on the 90. Got a little bit of stuff bent up here and it's no wonder the grill didn't fit right. Here you can see that the seam sealer's been cracked along this top edge. And the metal's a little wavy around here. And over here you can see that this edge got a little bit hammered. You can't really tell anything at all right there. This is consistent with the bumper damage that we saw that was right here on the front of the car. It would have pushed everything this way, and there's no point in me straightening any of this out without reassembling it all first. But I have to do it in a way that lets me get to it. I can straighten all of this, and if it's getting painted, it will be. These are all flesh wounds.
But anyway, this gives me a great opportunity to preserve everything that I've already got here for the next 32 years and more. Cars are not owned, they're curated. It was already very well curated and a numbers matching example of an original car and its maintenance over the course of its existence.
There it is. Pull this clean out. No rusty, no rusty. Look at that. This is just the biological layer. Yay! Oh man, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what this one looks like with a fresh paint job on it. All the places that nobody will ever see. It's all here. The body is just fantastic. But where we've got the rot is right here on the bumper. And we'll just have to see what I can do with that. I'm not doing that in this video. We're just looking at things and getting our empty canvas. Feel pretty good about this. I might call it a night. Yeah, some of that's gonna wait. Oh, I got a brake line I could take loose and then check that box. Cool. Missed it.
I might have missed filming that rear brake line, but since I'm dropping the front subframe, you can watch me take the front lines and ABS sensors loose from the body too. Yeah, I forgot about those. I'm not trying to test out their tensile strength. I got more Croyle too. The can and branding change right along with the price tag. The screws for the ABS cables are all self-tappers, round-headed screws. The X was packed with rust and I was expecting the worst from all of them. Using an impact driver was the best move because it broke the rust free. Matt's impact extractor would have done a much better job, but just like with the transmission jack versus the workbench on wheels, my impact driver was only 4 steps away, so it won. The brake lines came apart without a fight, and the other front wheel got the same exact treatment. I scratched all around the brackets, screw heads, and screwdriver slots of all these screws to clean out the funk and let the penetrating oil be its best self. Then hammered them all loose with the impact driver, and everything was going fine until I got to the 10th screw, but it finally relented. Let me unplug the sensor.
I didn't hurt it too bad.
The other brake line came loose so fast you didn't even see it happen. And that takes care of all the preparation to drop both subframes. I'm going to put the wheels back on this thing so we can roll this thing around and steer it while we move it to another bay. I've got some great, awesome projects lined up for this lift, and this doesn't have to slow any of them down. I can do everything that's left on the floor just fine. The subframe tech will be in another video. The steering rebuild, that's its own video. The bumper cover isn't needed until we do the body work. And the exact same thing can be said for the spoiler and all of the body trim, which the lift is in the way of removing right now anyway. There's a lot of stuff I still have to do in order to start the body work, but getting down to the bare body just to see where I'm starting out was the first and biggest hurdle on this project. And I'm glad you guys came along for this forensic episode. Behold Exhibit P. I just wanted you guys to know that I got the box that has the things and all the stuff. And there's my carrier bearings to rebuild the drive shaft with. Ordered on a Saturday night on a long holiday weekend, and they're on my doorstep next business day, thank you Extreme PSI. Also included in the box, one low bro joint repair kit, $102. That includes the boot, some grease, all the clips and the band clamps, and of course, a new gasket. Shims for both of the carrier bearings so that I can adjust their pinion angle. There's 3 brand new 27mm metric nuts for the differential yoke and the low bro joint connections. And last but not least, new OEM universal joints for that flawless, like new fit. Rebuilding a DSM drive shaft is a venture that now costs $750 because the joints are $120 a piece and there's 3 of them. Maybe we'll just add this little nugget onto the subframe refresh video. I'm not pressed to do it, but at least I'm ready for it. The charcoal canister is not actually attached to the frame rail. It's actually bolted to the firewall. Over here we've got the power steering. These 2 hoses actually are bolted to a bracket right there. I can take this hose clamp loose right here. And the subframe is basically free to go. Pretty proud of myself, I did it without pliers. There, it's ready to go. Because the other one is just this line right here and it's already disconnected. Now there's nothing on this front subframe that's keeping it from coming out except for 6 bolts. Same goes for the back, only 6 bolts hold it in. We've already got all that stuff disconnected. Of course, all this has to go. And we're going to do the rest of this on jack stands. You don't need to see me move it and put it on jack stands. That's not the important part of the story. I think I showed enough to help you form a pretty good decision of what my empty canvas looks like. I can't wait to get to the end of it. It's going to be a long haul, but it's going to be worth it. If the drive shaft is any indicator, this project's going to be an expensive one too. But this is a happy video, not a dreadful one. Some things are worth the effort, and this car is no exception. I'd be hard pressed to find another example anything like this one today. It's not impossible or out of the question, but finding one with as many miles as this, where everything's original and is still intact, packed with discontinued custom-made parts that you want to have, and still having a practically rust-free straight body seems like asking an awful lot. You and I both saw this one together. I caught it right at its turning point where everything can be saved and it's all still here. Most everything it needs I've already collected. Its direction is going from survivor status to resto mod, because with all the expense of the engine and how nice this body is, it really doesn't make sense to just fix the engine and send it. It deserves to have its negative character traits corrected and put its best foot forward with a better life. I've got some updates planned as you'd expect, and a whole lot more parts I still need to take off of it, but I think this is a good breaking point until we need those subframes. More has already happened to this chassis over the last month and in the past 16 years. This video let me get a big jump start on the bodywork planning, and it let me remove all the underbody mechanical things to work on while it all happens. Thanks for sticking around through all the dirty bits and for following this build. I'll be back really soon with something else awesome, so stay tubed.